anniversary of the World's Fair and the 35th anniversary of the Society. Tonight, we're going to see a very timely presentation about the 1904 World's Fair. With the Olympics starting in about 10 days, St. Louis is one of only 3 cities in the US to host the Summer Games. Society member Larry Gross will present an updated program about the Olympics, and we'll learn all about the games of the Third Olympiad and see if and how they advanced the Olympic movement. First, I want to see if there's any new members here tonight or any non-members. Please raise your hand for about 10 seconds so we can take a look and see how many people are waving their hand. We want to welcome you and urge you to become members. I don't see hardly anybody waving their hand, however. It's been out on Facebook for a day or so. But if you do spot any new people, the membership forms are on the Society's webpage. I'd love to give you a membership form in person, but Zoom won't allow that. Next, a couple of announcements. First, watch your email for news. Be sure and visit the Society webpage regularly. It provides current information about our upcoming meetings. There's a merchandise and mail order form, and also several years worth of pictures. We've continued to post our 2021 virtual meetings on YouTube, the Zoom meetings. There's, I think, 5 of them out there now, and this meeting will be out there in just a few days. We are going to keep the 2 most recent meetings as unlisted so that the general public can't see them. It's a member benefit. And when we get those posted, we will send a link to all members, just like we send announcements out, so that members can see the 2 most recent meetings. Be sure and check your Society's Facebook group page. There's pictures, postings, links to other presentations and videos about the fair. And also the Society's Instagram page is filled with pictures of the fair. And Holly does a great job of finding really unusual pictures. Now I'd like to offer just a few suggestions for Zoom. If you think of any questions for our presenter or about the Olympics, please type your questions into the chat area, and you can turn the chat area on by moving your mouse on the screen. You'll see buttons at the bottom, and one of them says chat. You'll see a panel come up on the right, and at the bottom of that panel, it says type your message here, and you can type a question in. There's also a small button in the top right of the black Zoom area for view options. You might want to watch the first part of the meeting in the presenter view, which shows the speaker in a larger size. The group view or gallery view shows all attendee images the same side in a gallery, and the person that's speaking has a yellow line around it. So since we're recording this Zoom meeting program for others to see, and your image can be seen by other attendees, you might want to compose a good view of yourself, because if you put your phone or something down on the floor, we're getting a view of your chin or vice versa. So take a look at the image that you're sending out also. Not that we don't like seeing any angle of anybody. If you have to leave for a minute or are eating or something like that, you can stop your video feed by moving your mouse, and there's the second button at the bottom is stop video. And if I stop my video feed turns into a picture of myself. You can upload a picture, or if you stop your video and don't have a picture, your name will just appear in larger letters. So I'm back now. And like I said, you can upload a photo of yourself to Zoom to use as your picture if you do stop your video. So my reminder to make sure I'm recording, and it looks like I am. I'd like to set the stage for this presentation describing what took place 117 years ago at the St. Louis World's Fair. It was a Friday. The fair had been open for 10 weeks. Attendance was increasing over the summer, and the summertime events were in full swing. The French celebrated a special day today. How many people know what that is? Raise your hand. It was Bastille Day. Their building was a replica of the Grand Trianon at Versailles, and that's where they celebrated. Dr. Alexander de Manille read the names of the Frenchmen who had helped found the city of St. Louis back in 1764. He said that their names would never be forgotten, as many of their names marked the streets and parks of St. Louis. The famous French balloonist Alberto Santos Dumont, who had flown an airship, a dirigible, around the Eiffel Tower, had returned to France. In an interview, he said that he had no intention of returning to St. Louis, having found that his dirigible airship had been intentionally damaged. The chief of exposition police believed that Santos Dumont had either damaged it himself with a knife or had hired someone to do it. Santos Dumont said he never planned to fly in St. Louis, but that he just wanted to exhibit his airship and charge admission. Native American Indian dancers presented dances to honor the 2nd Regiment of the Illinois National Guard. While the regiment didn't show up, the Sioux, Apache, Pawnee, and several other tribes provided colorful entertainment for a large crowd. The audience included not only visitors to the fair, but also African Pygmies, South American Patagonians, and Japanese Ainus. Unfortunately, Geronimo couldn't participate, as the US government would not allow him to dress up in his native garb. Finally, the Board of Lady Managers had earlier tried to force the Igorots in the Philippine village to dress more modestly, but since the exhibit was outside the St. Louis city limits, city jurisdiction couldn't force them to dress more modestly. Now, however, a War Department official ordered the natives to be outfitted in silk breeches. The Anthropology Department opposed this change, and today President Roosevelt declared that there was nothing indecent about the way the Igorots dressed. Yay for Teddy. And as a final reminder, if you do have any questions, please enter them into the Zoom comments panel. They will be monitored and relayed by David Meyer at the end of the presentation. So now it's time for our presentation. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Larry Gross, besides being a good guy. He's a lifelong St. Louisan. He first learned about the fair from his grandmother, who attended the fair when she was in her late 20s. Larry taught English and journalism at Southwest High School in St. Louis at the same time that member Reva Davis taught there. And a couple of his students in the society are at this meeting tonight, our current editor, Jana Meehan, and member Roger Greider. He later began a business with a partner, writing for the media, doing graphics, marketing, advertising, etc., and made a second career out of that. He's a charter member of the World's Fair Society, having attended the third meeting back in 1986. He was bulletin editor for 6 years, starting about in 1988. And then he became editor again in 2011 for another 6 years. So Larry, when are we going to get another 6 years out of you? He produced over 140 issues of the Bulletin. He worked with Max Storm and others on the 2004 Olympic medals book, writing most of the copy. And he continues to help the Society out with numerous projects, such as articles for the Bulletin, 2 meeting presentations, the 2016 calendar, graphics work, including, Larry, stand up so we can see your t-shirt. Surprise, a t-shirt he designed. Banquet entertainer, showing up to play the piano and stuff like that for us sometimes, and just helping out in a lot of different ways. So with that, I turn the proverbial microphone over to Larry Gross, and he can take the PowerPoint and screen view and talk about himself for a while, and then go on to the presentation. Larry, thank you.
Well, thanks, Mike, for that stellar introduction. If I'd known you were going to say such nice things, you could have evened it out by telling them that I'm also a fan of the Three Stooges. Well, thanks everyone for attending, and I'm glad you're interested in the 1904 Olympics. Our society has, let me get to our PowerPoint. Our society has had a presentation coinciding with the Summer Olympics right from the beginning. The first one in 1988 in Seoul, Korea. And I'm going to be using a modified version. Mainly it's Max Storm's PowerPoint. He spent many hours collecting the images of the athletes you'll see. Excuse me a second while I, oh, there we go. He dedicated his presentation to June Beck. Many of you may know who she is, but some may not. She was an original charter member. She attended the first meeting of the society. She was also a teacher at Wash U and Missouri U, and she began writing and lecturing about the 1904 Olympics and ended up being connected with the International Olympics Committee. So she was honored to carry the official Olympic torch when it came through St. Louis in 2004, as you see in those pictures. And where were those summer games in 2004? They were in Athens. And she gave presentations about the Olympics originally. Then I'd like to dedicate this to Max, who at a certain point, he became the presenter and he really beefed up the visual side of the presentation. And he's always treated our Olympics with honor and respect. For my take on this presentation, I'd like you to consider in your mind as we go along, did St. Louis do justice in adding to the Olympic tradition, or did we detract from that tradition? I say that because in doing research, there's a lot of people on the internet sites that consider the 1904 Olympics a laughingstock, a sham, at best, a poor presentation. And I hope we all learn more to be able to respond to people who may say that. Theodore Roosevelt, as you see there on the program, was the honorary president of the Games. Do you know who the actual official president of the Games was? Now, the 1904 Olympics were completely entwined with the 1904 World's Fair. A number of figures from the fair were involved in the Olympics. The fairgrounds incorporated most of the Olympic venues, and they're represented on all the fair maps. The games were incorporated into the schedule of the fair, and they were publicized as fair events. Now, the good thing about that is the Olympics gained prestige, publicity, and even attendance from being part of the World's Fair. A negative might be that the Olympics were overshadowed, some feel, by being part of the World's Fair and were treated as kind of a stepchild. Now, we'll be talking about the founder of the modern Olympics. In his long, illustrious career, held both opinions. At one point, he said it was an advantage to be part of the World's Fair. Later, he said it was terrible to be part of the World's Fair. Max's respect for our Olympics comes partly from his sense of its history. He felt there was a through line from the ancient Greek games right to St. Louis in 1904. Historians pinpoint the original ancient games as being held in Olympia in 776 BC. Here's a kind of an archaeological find of what the Olympic village looked like, I guess, then. This is in Olympia. They were able to sort of locate these, well, I guess you'd say venues. Max and Shara Storm visited the original Olympics venue in Olympia. In fact, there's Shara at the original location. That may have been where some runners started. And I guess she did well because she won what they gave as awards at the original Olympics, an olive wreath. Now, the modern Olympics started in 1896. The Olympic movement began, and they were held in Athens, Greece. It's a fitting place. The photo below is from 1896, and then the one above is more recent times. Looks pretty much the same. The revival of the modern games, we had them in 1896, 1900, and then ours in 1904. It's important to our story to note that the original Olympics committee were adamant that the Olympics be held every 4 years, not every year or 2 or 6 or whatever, but a quadrennial event. The Summer Olympics have been canceled 3 times because of war, and last year postponed because of the pandemic. Now, this man is important to our story, and that's Pierre de Coubertin. And he's father of the modern Olympics. He was a visionary and idealist. He founded the International Olympics Committee, and he was its president from 1896 through 1925. So that's quite a run. There, as you can see from the Olympic Creed, the idea of participation is more important than winning. And again, an idealistic idea of amateur athletics. The Coubertin Medal was inaugurated in 1964. You see it there. According to the Olympics Museum, it's one of the noblest honors that can be bestowed upon an Olympic athlete. More about him later. Oh, by the way, this is kind of interesting. His heart is buried in Olympia, Greece. The rest of him isn't, but his heart is. That's how much I guess he liked the Olympics. Another person we'll be interested in is James Sullivan. He's a key figure. He was in charge of the games on the ground in St. Louis. Coubertin, while head of the IOC, never attended the St. Louis Olympics. He didn't like St. Louis. Sullivan originally supported the Chicago Games, but to his credit, he was persuaded that St. Louis would be a better choice. He founded, as it says there, the AAU, so that his organization was heavily involved in the high turnout of US athletes in our Olympics. He believed in the ideal of amateur athletics all of his life. His award, as you see there at the bottom, first given to Bobby Jones in 1930. Other exceptional athletes, Wilma Rudolph, Mark Spitz, Greg Louganis, Jackie Joyner-Kersee. I think that's interesting in that she's from this area, so it kind of makes a loop there from his time. Unfortunately, Sullivan also believed in the natural athletic superiority of white people. Many other people did too, but he advocated this position actively. Well, as you might expect, the president of the Third Olympiad was David R. Francis, among many of his other achievements in life. Now, some of it you may know about Chicago being chosen for the 1904 Olympics. They weren't just in the running, they were actually chosen in 1901. But then by 1903, St. Louis was chosen by the same committee. So what happened? What changed in 22 months? St. Louis wasn't a factor in being having the Olympics if our World's Fair was going to be in 1903. In fact, a month before the IOC picked Chicago, an envoy from St. Louis came to Coubertin in Paris and tried to make a pitch for our Olympics. St. Louis having the Olympics, but the committee voted no. But we first had to have our fair in 1904 for this to even be a problem. After Chicago was chosen, our fair kept getting more prestige and the backing of the US government in a big way. So it was shaping up to be a huge event, as we all know, the biggest fair. While Coubertin had a terrible experience tying the Olympics to the Paris World's Fair, France didn't like organized athletics as a movement, and they thought it was too English. The IOC recognized the boost that the Olympics would get being part of our fair. Chicago started out talking big about having the University of Chicago as venues for some of the events. And they were going to build a 75,000 seat Olympic stadium. Influential Chicago businessman named Henry Ferber headed up the Chicago Olympics Committee, but he couldn't deliver as well as promised. He also had a meeting in France with Coubertin, and Coubertin wasn't impressed. So St. Louis, meanwhile, promised all new facilities, lots of financial backing, including the prestige of Congress had extended $5 million in working capital to the fair. And then St. Louis was a threat to hold some competing games in the same summer. Now, this may sound kind of like below the belt, but that St. Louis threatened to hold counter games that would pull athletes away from the Olympics or lessen their attendance. In a defensible way, though, all St. Louis was saying that athletics were very popular in America in 1904, and it was determined to hold prestigious games of some kind. So St. Louis won out, cablegram, February 13th, 1903. Everything's settled, you have the games. From all these factors, the momentum had come to St. Louis. The Chicago Olympics Committee itself came around to the idea of St. Louis. A.G. Spalding, you know that name, the sports equipment king, he also threw his support behind it. And to their credit, the city of Chicago is very gracious about giving it up, all except for the University of Chicago students. They didn't like that. The IOC was going to vote, however, Coubertin decided. Now, rumor had it that President Roosevelt picked St. Louis. In his memoirs, written in 1931, Coubertin said he left it up to Roosevelt. However, there's no indication in his memoirs and papers, in Roosevelt's papers, anyone's, that this ever happened. And logically, it doesn't make sense that as a politician, Roosevelt would choose one of the top 4 cities in the US over another. I don't think he put himself in that position. At the time, Coubertin himself made the case that perhaps St. Louis would make more sense. So that was the big news. Now, what exactly were the Olympic Games of 1904? There's some confusion, and that kind of hurts our reputation. First of all, the International Olympics Committee itself hadn't cast in stone all the sports and events that would become Olympic events. It's only the Third Olympics. It wasn't helped that James Sullivan, who was in charge of the Olympics, wanted to promote athletics. He wanted to have an athletic event every day of the fair. Well, it didn't turn out quite that much, but he corralled many Olympic events under the Olympics umbrella. So instead of the usual week or two of concentrated games, the so-called Olympic Games took place over 7 months of the fair. And if you look at the Olympic schedule at the time, some things that were called Olympic events were an elementary school athletic championship, a public schools track meet, and a Turner's demonstration that had 3,500 people out on the field. That's why you get this report that there might have been 9,000 Olympic participants. Well, no, not really. Even at the time, though, a distinction was made between all the events and the core track and field Olympic contests from August 28th. I think that might maybe should be 29th to September 3rd. Another concern or discussion point about our Olympics is that not many other nations participated. There were only 12, depending how you count some people, maybe a few more. So that's part of the knock, that we didn't have worldwide participation. Well, we all know it was difficult to travel to St. Louis in those days. But the 1896 Olympics only had 14 people. 1900 had 24 and 22 in 1908. So it wasn't, they didn't do a whole lot better. The number of Americans participating, as you see there, over other nationalities is another criticism. Countries hadn't sponsored Olympic athletes yet, so clubs and athletic organizations did, and our country was primed for sending people with Sullivan and Spalding getting 523 participants to take part. There were some American citizens who, because of their ethnicity, actually competed for other countries. Only 5 countries have participated in every Summer Olympics. I don't know whether you know what those are. Most of them make sense: France, Great Britain, Greece, Switzerland, but also Australia. I found that a little surprising. The venues of the Olympics here were Francis Field, the Physical Culture Building, the U.S. Life-Saving Lake, the Marathon Course, Creve Coeur Lake and Glen Echo Country Club. Now, most of you are familiar with this map. I always start at the Art Museum. There's Art Hill and the Grand Basin. As most of you know, only about half of Forest Park was used for the fair. Let's call this the Hampton entrance, and that's Oakland up there, and then Skinker running down to this area, Y down in Forsyth, and the fair went all the way over to Big Bend, might be cut off there on the far right. So looking closer at Y down and Skinker, you have the U.S. Life-Saving Lake and Francis Field and the Physical Culture Building as part of the fairgrounds. It's really nice that you can today, I mean, I think I commemorate this really nicely at Francis Field. If you haven't been over there lately, you should go and look at all the remembrances of the Olympics. And it's great that the Olympics protects its and trademarks its name. You can't just call yourself an Olympic athletic field. Our town, of course, can do it because we're legit. Now, here's how a contemporary look at Francis Field, playing field. And then Max did something kind of neat. First, though, he had an arrow pointing to the University City Hall. That tree is obscuring it. And then he took us back. I said he took us back to the field during the Olympics. That's kind of cool. And then, as some of you know, the Physical Culture Building, our Francis Gymnasium, was changed so that today this is how it looks with the 2 wings, which I'll talk about in a second. Max also found a way to give us the view of the field if you were sitting in the stands. Like most track meets, different events occurring at the same time. There's the stands at the time and how a more recent view below. And some of the changes, the Francis Gymnasium was expanded to a fitness center where that other picture you saw, they tore down the back of the original building to build on 2 wings to make it very big in 2016. And then if you haven't seen this, you should go visit the Olympic rings nearby, this sculpture dedicated in 2018. Now, our Olympics are notable for being the first time the Olympic medals were given to the 3 top winners, the gold, the silver, and the bronze. Before 1904, only trophies were given, and it wasn't standardized what they looked like. Now, while the actual medals changed, it's been gold, silver, and bronze, as you know, ever since. So let's go to opening day. This ceremony shows the so-called opening of the Olympics on May 14th, but there weren't any really Olympic contests held that day. And as you see, the ceremonies look pretty much the same, don't they, as they do today? Now we're going to look at some of the events, or most of them, but I'm not just going to give stats of sports stats of the winners in that. What Max did, as you see here, and you can note this for yourself, on some of these slides, he put little medals for first, second, third place to show you who won. Archery was part of the U.S. National Championships. Only the U.S. was in this event. There were 35 competitors and 6 events. 2 interesting facts. The oldest Olympian to win a gold medal, Galen Spencer, was 64 years old. Pretty good eyesight. That was actually broken in 1912 when someone older did that. And the only women in the 1904 Olympics took part in the archery contest. Archery was introduced in our games, and the women's archery. In 1900, the women competed in golf and tennis, but those were dropped as women's participation was dropped. So 6 women competed, and Lyda Hall won 3 gold medals. Now, this is a theme I'll emphasize again, that as far as the competition, she had won 17 national championships in her career. So that adds credibility to the competition. She was quite good. Cycling, it was all Marcus Hurley. He won 4 golds and a bronze in various length races. Tennis, there was an elimination tournament, was played on dirt courts near the Physical Culture Building. There were other tennis matches and tournaments played as well as part of the World's Fair. I want to mention St. Louis's own Dwight Davis. He won, he's a famous athlete and benefactor to tennis. He participated in the Olympics tournament, but he was eliminated early. His claim to fame, of course, is he donated a trophy and started a tournament, the Davis Cup. It only became bigger and bigger through the years and more prestigious. So we can be proud of him, and the Dwight Davis Tennis Center in Forest Park is named after him. That is the Davis Cup. It's not standing on a platform. That's the entire cup. It's kind of like the Stanley Cup, has had additions over the years. Anyone ever heard of roque? As it says, it combines croquet and billiards. It's played like playing croquet on a billiard table. That picture isn't from our Olympics with the palm trees, but these two are. Roque was a competition in only one Olympics in 1904. Same true of croquet. Now we go to weightlifting. The all-around dumbbell refers to the event, not the participants. Oscar Ostoff was a world record holder. And here's where I want to make this point, that while we can, people can comment that our Olympics didn't have enough world participation, he wasn't competing against weightlifters from all over the world, but he was competing against their records. So he became the best in the world with his lift right here in St. Louis. That's a great picture there at the bottom, Max found. I would say the picture on the right is used very frequently when people refer to our Olympics or write about it. Winters was another world-class lifter. 2 weeks before the Olympics, he broke a world record by lifting 140 pounds with one hand from the ground to over his head. This is a nice photo of the gold winner, the two-hand overhand. His lift was 60 pounds more than second place person, although I don't think all that pounds is in that picture. Wrestling, there were 7 events. For the first time, weight classes were included for the wrestling events. All wrestling was freestyle or Greco-Roman, similar to the ancient Greek games as the ancient artwork below indicates. Now, wrestling is a category that shows the list of countries participating can get muddled. 2 of the 42 wrestlers were Norwegians in the United States wrestling for the US. However, Norway has since contended that because neither was a citizen of the US in 1904, they should be listed as wrestling for Norway. Soccer style football, as it was called, gave out no medals, but they did later do that. Here's a kind of a medal, but it's not an Olympic one. American style football, they simply lifted the WashU's football schedule and called it an Olympic football, with the exception of game between Indian government schools when President Roosevelt attended the fair. He waited till the national elections were over. I have this here because Max had this event covered so well. He has a program, a button, a ticket, and then the picture. Basketball was a demonstration sport. When you look at the lopsided scores, no wonder it wasn't an official Olympic sport until 1936. I bet games 1 and 2 were fun to watch. We don't know much about baseball and the Olympics. However, this medal still exists. Now I want to take time out to talk about physical culture and the physical culture building. The fair had a Department of Physical Culture, and this is a header from a 1903 World's Fair Bulletin, and it shows that the fair supported physical culture, and James Sullivan was in charge of that. Now, physical culture was a worldwide movement in the 19th century, emphasizing health and strength training. I think we would call it physical fitness today. The director of exhibits for the fair, Frederick Skiff, separated the exhibits of the fair into 12 categories. One of the categories was physical culture, and the Olympics came under this section. And there is the physical culture building. It was built as part of both the fair and the Olympics and then turned over to Washington U. It was filled with sports and training equipment from A.G. Spalding's company. The description at the time said it was a fully equipped gymnasium with hundreds of exhibits from schools, colleges, and athletic clubs showing the advancement made in athletics and physical training. The building had a lecture hall and classrooms, and a number of lectures and papers were presented in this building about aspects of physical culture. And as we go to boxing, Olympic boxing was held in the physical culture building. Boxing was introduced as a new event in the 1904 Olympics, and other than 1912, it has remained so ever since. Women's boxing was a demonstration sport in 1904.
Well, I'd like to get back to the meeting.
If Mike, are you talking? I can't hear you. I guess I'll keep going.
I'll look for you in the waiting, okay?
I can't hear you. The gear here makes it appear that they were more worried about protecting their bodies than protecting their heads. Can everyone hear me? Is everything going okay? Okay.
We can hear you, Larry.
Okay, great. This slide about fencing shows that 5 sports have been represented in every Olympics: athletics, cycling, gymnastics, and swimming and fencing. Now, when we get to these water events, let's go from the fairgrounds close in here to this U.S. life-saving exhibit lake, which was used to do just that. But during the time period for the Olympics, it was turned over for the water sports. Now, our fair, I'll do that, I'm sorry. So used to talking about the fair. The Olympics here was the first time that diving was introduced in the official program. And they called it, it was the platform and springboard, like today, only they called the springboard part fancy diving. It's kind of true. These pictures are kind of well known and used quite often. They use the lake. When he wasn't singing, Charlie Daniels was the first gold medal winner at the St. Louis Olympics. He won in the 220 and the 440. Just kidding about the singing. He makes our Olympics look good in terms of the competition because he was a multiple gold medalist and a 2-time world record holder. Both the breaststroke and the relay race in swimming were first introduced at this Olympics. Now, I put this in here because I just think it's funny. Have you ever heard of the plunge for distance? This event was criticized as not being athletic. The competitor jumped into the water from a pier and was not allowed to use any of his limbs to propel himself for 60 seconds. After 60 seconds, or whenever he emerged, they measured how far he went. It doesn't sound very Olympic. What's next? The cannonball? Water polo was also held at that lake. Some good pictures. Only 3 teams competed in water polo in 1904, all American. This was possible because in 1904, countries didn't send teams to the Olympics. Athletic clubs and other organizations did. So the rules allowed for multiple entries from one country. The Missouri Athletic Club won the bronze medal, but then of course they won a medal. There were 3 competitors. The IOC has turned this now into a demonstration event. There are the winners. Gymnastics, 2 terrific standouts. Anton Haida won 8 gold medals at this one Olympics. George Iser, you see his name there popping up. One of the greats, he won 3 gold, 2 silver, and 1 bronze on the very same day. Now, some of you may know this. Let's add one other fact about Iser. He had a wooden leg. So there is his wooden leg. And that's quite an achievement. I think Max added lacrosse because he thought these were interesting names for Olympic participants. That's because this is the bronze team. The Mohawk Indians were the team that won the bronze, and those are the team members. The thing you did at camp was an Olympic event in 1904, a tug of war. Yes, a team on both sides of a rope tried to pull the opposition over a line 6 feet away. This was discontinued after the 1920 Olympics. All 3 medals were won by American teams, since, as I said, you could enter more than one team. Max always felt the tug of war should be reinstated in the Olympics. Maybe he thought this would be a better way for nations to settle things. Now we're going to turn to the infamous marathon of 1904. It was based on, as I'm sure most of you know, on a legendary run by Phidippides, a soldier running from Marathon, Greece to Athens in 490 BC to bring news of a Greek victory. He supposedly delivered his message and collapsed and died on the spot. The distance was 40,000 meters or 24.85 miles. The modern marathon from 1921 on is 26.219 miles. The whole idea was invented by a friend of Coubertin's. Well, there they are, the 32 runners. It was held on Tuesday, August 30th, the last Olympic event, just as it still is. Only 4 nations competed and only 14 finished. It was a 90-degree day and was started in the afternoon. David Francis fired the starting pistol. It was run on dusty roads, and the rules allowed for assistance. It's important to keep that in mind. Some of the runners were legit. These runners, 3 runners, had won the Boston Marathon, which was in existence. The winner of our marathon came in 4th in the Boston. So a number of people had business out there, but quite a few didn't. Some had no training, no practice, bad shoes, or no running gear. I'm looking at you, number 3. It'll be more about him. By today's standards, the whole thing seemed to be a joke. Over here on this map, you can see Francis Field. They began with 5 laps in the stadium, so the folks get a look at them. Then they ran out the east side onto Forsyth. This is not to scale. They essentially ran out to Clayton, which would be much farther along. But this kind of shows the current names of the roads on Merrimack, Brentwood, over Manchester, Dallas, Clayton Road, Lindbergh, Olive, North and South Road, back to Forsyth, and back into the stadium. There's a picture at the top there of them running in the stadium. 2 Tswana tribesmen, Len Tao and Jan Mashiani from South Africa, ran in the marathon. They were both in the Boer War exhibit taking place at the fair. And they came by kind of on a whim. They were actually they were in the actual Boer War itself. They used a number of participants in this exhibit, recreation. And so they were actually long distance runners. And there they are. And they're our first South African Olympians. They did okay since they'd been trained to run. This person was also quite a good runner, but he was also quite a character. Felix Carvajal of Cuba was 5 feet tall. He was a farmer mailman. He ran a lot in Cuba. So he wanted to run in our Olympics. His trip to the Olympics was crazy. He came to New Orleans, gambled on dice, and lost all of his money. So he hitchhiked or walked partly to St. Louis. He showed up for the race wearing a long sleeve shirt, long pants, a beret, and heavy street shoes. A fellow runner, Sheridan, cut off his pants to make them more easy to run in. He was actually one of the best athletes in the race, but it's been reported that he lost almost 60 minutes stopping to chat with people. He ate peaches while he ran. he hadn't eaten in 40 hours. Can you imagine starting this race that way? He ate some green apples, got a bellyache. He took a nap, it said. A dog chased him for a while. So quite a character, but he actually did okay. I believe he came in fourth. Now, most everybody who knows about our Olympics knows about the Fred Loers incident, I'll call it. And I think that's really what, more than anything else, except maybe the Anthropology Days, hurt this Olympics, because it made it seem like a joke. It's like a punchline. Oh, the guy who hitched a ride to win the marathon. Well, no, that's not exactly what happened. At the 9-mile point, he developed cramps and just gave up and wasn't going to run the race. So he hitched a ride back to the stadium. He recovered from his cramps and decided to get out of the car and start running again. It's important to know that a race official ordered him off the course, but then he explained he was just running to get back to the stadium. So that's one person who knew he wasn't a contestant anymore. He ran by the leader, Hicks, who was struggling, but Thomas Hicks kept running because he was told Loers was out of the race. So Loers ran into the stadium, and the crowd, seeing him, thought he was in the lead, and they were all cheering for him, and he finished the final lap. And he said he did it kind of on a whim and as having fun with it. But the Olympic officials didn't think it was funny. James Sullivan banned him from amateur competition for life from the AAU. I guess he explained himself well, because this was rescinded. And in 1905, he won the Boston Marathon. So he was not a joke runner. He just had bowed out. Here's the real winner, Thomas Hicks. He was kind of in a daze by the time he finished the race. And there's the cup that he won, that David Francis donated. Now, Hicks was helped by two men the last 10 miles, Hugh McGrath and Charles P. Lucas. Sometimes they propped him up holding his arms. He was third for a long time, but the other two in front of him couldn't continue. Here are some things we know: that a sponge was used to moisten his mouth. He took strychnine and the white of an egg as stimulants. He had a second dose of strychnine and a swallow of brandy. Warm water heated by a car radiator was used to give him a full body sponge bath. He could barely break the tape and fell into the arms of a dozen people. The Chicago Athletic Association protested his win, not for the help he got, but because he had two pace cars, as you see, to help him. So his time was 3 hours, 28 minutes, and 53 seconds. It's a slow time, but not bad given the circumstances. There's the David Francis Marathon Cup, front and back. James Sullivan thought the race was so grueling, he saw it in Paris and here, and he thought it should be banned. There were so many dropouts because a few runners were middle distance runners and not experienced in a marathon. Carvajal, the Cuban, was wearing street clothes, and his antics didn't help the reputation of this marathon. 10 Greek entrants had never run a marathon. The conditioning course were not well thought out with the afternoon start in the sun, and dust was kicked up by automobiles following or leading. But the rules did allow for assistance, even though that seems ridiculous today. The Fred Loers car ride just adds to the poor reputation. And now, taking strychnine seems like cheating, but there were no rules against performance-enhancing drugs. This is what Hicks had to say about it. while you look at that, on the positive side, there were 10,000 spectators. So it was a popular event. Alice Roosevelt attended. Quite a few participants were qualified long distance runners, but the course was so brutal, they didn't make it. And there were lessons to be learned to make future marathons better. In Paris, for instance, the course went through city streets, and some people cheated they knew the streets of Paris and they took side street shortcuts. My opinion is, if you take out the lures of riding in a car, this marathon, while grueling, was pretty legit. Okay, let's go on to some other running events. 3 names stand out, as you see there: Archie Hahn, Harry Hillman, and James Lightbody. Archie Hahn won all 3 of the shorter runs. He won the 100 in 2 consecutive Olympics, although 1906 wasn't exactly an Olympics, but this feat was not equaled until 1988 by Carl Lewis, who won, though, by disqualification. Max collected these great shots of, there's another Olympian down there on the lower left, we'll see in a minute. Archie wasn't real tall. There he is receiving the cup for his win, as well, of course, as the medals. Harry Hillman was a middle distance runner, and he won those events. .400 meters he won. We'll talk about George Poge in a minute. There's the starting line. And then James Lightbody, if for no other reason, we should note this man, because to me he is the greatest name in track and field, Lightbody. He was a longer distance runner. He legitimized our games by setting a world record for the 1,500 meter race. So shows we had world competitors. There he is receiving a souvenir cup. He won the steeplechase, which had an odd length at that time. Today it's 3,000 meters. It's the only time it was run at that length. And I say the steeplechase is the only track event in which you could conceivably drown. There are water hazards. Sorry about that. So Harry Hillman won the hurdles. And the first African-American to win a medal at modern day Olympics was George Coleman Poge. He stayed in St. Louis and taught at Sumner High School. This picture below is pretty famous, that he won the bronze medal in the 200 and 400 meter hurdles. There you see the two medalists running. Same picture. Oh, we turn to jumping. Ray Urey won all 3 gold medals for the standing jumps. In those days, they had standing jumps and running jumps. The running high jump was won by Samuel Jones. There's his trophy, close up. Now here's an example of what I've been showing. These loving cups or trophies were given to the winners in track and field. This was a traditional item given at amateur track meets as another way to celebrate an amateur's accomplishments. Since you couldn't give the winners cash or prizes, at least they might have something really nice to have in their trophy case. In the Paris Games of 1900, that's all the top winners received. And the trophy tradition continued, even though standard Olympic medals were issued in 1904. They didn't, and here's the table with all the trophies before they gave them out. There were 20 events that had cups as an additional award, all sponsored by prominent people at the time. Each cup was unique and elaborate. Some of the sponsors we know: David Francis, as I said, for the marathon, the Lemp brothers, the brewing people, the standing jumps, Isaac Taylor, a director of the fair, the discus, A.G. Spalding, the team championship, and Frederick Skiff, the 100-meter dash. Ray Urey won gold medals over 3 Olympics. That's very difficult to do. He was known as the human frog. There he is when a standing jump in that picture. Now, what we should add as something to know about him, he had polio when he was a boy, and he was in a wheelchair. But it didn't, it must not have been devastating. He exercised his way out of it, and boy, did he. This stamp was issued in 1990 in a booklet of 5 gold medal Olympians. Urey had 8 golds altogether. This was one of the best examples of our Olympics having legitimacy. If you were in the stands on that day in August, you saw an accomplishment that was never equaled until this event was dropped in the 1930s, the standing broad jump. Ray Urey set the record a little over 11.5 feet. So when critics say the athletes weren't competing against hard competition from around the world, they were competing against those records. It's neat that Max found this ad and the photo, put them together. The hop, step, and jump, or the triple jump as it's known, has been in the Olympics, always been in the Olympics. Meyer Prinstein won, becoming the only Olympic athlete to win both the long and triple jump in the same Olympics. Prinstein is a good example of the possible confusion of just what nationality you're rooting for in 1904. Prinstein was a Jew, but he was but he was born in Poland. He became a US citizen, and in the 1904 Olympics, he represented the Irish American Athletic Club. There's some good shots of pole vaulting. 5 men broke the Olympic record in that year, and it makes me wonder if some new technique was adopted by everyone in pole vaulting. Now to throwing things. John Flanagan is another world-class competitor in the 1904 games. He won gold in 1900, 1904, and called the greatest hammer thrower of the 20th century. He set 18 Olympic records in his career, not in 1904, but definitely a top competitor in this event. Well, this was an exciting contest, the discus throw in 1904. First, Ralph Rose set an Olympic record with his toss. Then Martin Sheridan equaled it. So they both set a record, but they had to, in those days, they had a throw off, throwing 3 more times. Today, they would just count the second best throw. And Sheridan won. Sheridan made a world record discus throw, but it was in a non-Olympic toss while he was in St. Louis. See, I think I may have. No, here we are. The 56-pound weight throw. Do you know about this man? Etienne De Marteaux wanted to go to the Olympics. He's from Canada. They refused him leave from his job as a police officer, but he went anyway. He was fired, but he won the gold medal, so he got a hero's welcome. So they decided to rehire him. I think the moral of the story is if you want to take a leave of absence from your job, come back with an Olympic gold medal and you'll get your job back. This man was good at throwing things. He was a fan favorite. The fact that he won in 2 more Olympics with more international competition shows he was one of the top competitors in the world. He established a new world record of 48 feet 7 inches in the shot put. By the way, with the exception of the marathon race, there's never been any criticism of the judging or the measuring and so forth in this Olympics as being shoddy or sloppy or anything like that. Rose set another world's record later that lasted 16 years. So fans were watching the best in this event. Rowing took place at Creve Coeur Lake. The events doubled as the United States Championships. There they are. Going on to golf, Glen Echo was founded in 1901 by George McGrew with the help of his son-in-law, Albert Bond Lambert. And we, of course, know the Lambert name. He was a big booster of aviation. He was the primary benefactor for Charles Lindbergh's transatlantic flight. For his contributions, of course, the St. Louis Airport was named after him. Now, Glen Echo Country Club, for 112 years, was the only golf club in the world that could fly an Olympic flag because golf was dropped after our Olympics until 1916. Going back to Albert Bond Lambert, he advanced to the quarterfinals, but of course he didn't win. But he competed also in 1900, so he's the only person to have competed in both Olympic golf matches. Now that statement, of course, has probably changed since 2016, but he competed in 1900 and 1904. The winner, Canadian George Lyon, for 112 years. Again, he was the only Olympic gold medalist because they quit the event. If you ever find the golf gold medal at a garage sale, it's his gold medal's probably worth a lot. He celebrated, by the way, by walking on his hands in the clubhouse. The team event used stroke play. If you're a golfer, the individual used match play, hole by hole. I have one other track and field event, and these were called the Handicapped Games. Now, this doesn't refer to people who are handicapped in some way, physically handicapped. These were games and events, but not official. It allowed lesser athletes to compete against top-notch ones by being given an advantage. So as you see in this picture, the best runner has to start back from the slower runners. They get a little advantage. In the jumping events, inches were added to the jumps. Culver Hasted represented the Missouri Athletic Club. He was the first St. Louis Sullivan to win a medal, although it was in the handicaps. He was called the king of the handicaps because he won a 60-yard dash, 100-yard, and running broad jump. The reason these handicap events allowed athletes to meet and compete against big-time athletes. And it gave some events to take place between the official ones. You couldn't have these athletes just going from one event to another, so you had to give the crowd something to watch. So now just briefly talk about Anthropology Days. I would assume you've all heard about this, but this was a debacle. The mistake of the 1904 Olympics was a two-day event on August 12th and 13th. And the idea was that members of the native or primitive peoples on exhibit at the fair, some of them would compete with white athletes. On the first day, it was Olympic-style athletic contests, though, for which the native peoples had no familiarity or experience. Now, why did they do this? This idea was hatched by James Sullivan, whom we know, and W.J. McGee, the head of the Department of Anthropology. McGee was a social scientist, and he wanted to collect data to compare results among the native peoples. Sullivan, as I've said before, was a racial purist. He wanted to disprove the idea that was current at the time that Aboriginal peoples living more primitive lifestyles were more physically superior to Anglo-Saxons. That was a theory, that because they lived in the wild and used their bodies more. But the deck was stacked to come out as he wanted it to. They didn't know how to do some of this stuff. But he said the whole meeting proves conclusively that the savage has been a very much overrated man from an athletic point of view. As a spectacle, it was a condescending amusement. While some performances might have been admirable, mostly the native people failed and looked laughable. For instance, the European style games like the shot put, the high jump, and others, not only did the native people not get much practice, some of the concepts like a starting pistol or breaking through the tape weren't fully understood with the language barriers. These games weren't condemned at the time in the press, but Anthropology Days steadily gained a shameful reputation. Coubertin himself condemned them in his 1931 memoirs. But keep in mind, Anthropology Days was not really part of the Olympics. They were never called Olympic at the time. There were no Olympic medals given. It was just a sideshow. All right, future Olympics. Did you know the Olympics will be in Paris in 2024 and Los Angeles for the third time? Only 3 cities in the United States have held the Olympics besides St. Louis, are Atlanta and Los Angeles. Okay, coming to a conclusion, our Olympics, success or not? The minuses are, as we said, it wasn't very international. Only 62 of the 651 athletes were from foreign countries, depending on how you count some individuals. There were not many participants outside of the US. Only 12 nations participated, including the US. It was a big mistake calling all those events that later are made fun of as being Olympic. Marathon itself is reflected badly on the conduct of the games, but really they were conducted okay, other than that. And of course, Anthropology Days. On the plus side, we maintained and added to Olympic tradition and instituted the gold, silver, and bronze medals. contests were actually conducted rigorously, upholding Olympic standards. Our venues and facilities were excellent in their day and well attended. 13 Olympic records were broken and 4 world records were broken. So we had world athletes, class athletes competing in many events. So we can be proud. Only 3 cities have hosted the Summer Olympics. Although one of the oldest, St. Louis, maintains its Olympic venue. Google sometime Olympic venues abandoned, and you'll see some shocking whole stadiums just gone to ruin, and in this century. And except for the marathon, St. Louis Games were conducted honorably and up to standard. Okay, that's it. I want to thank you for listening for so long, but I hope you enjoyed it.
Larry, that was great. David, you can unmute. I don't know if you've been watching the chat feed, et cetera. There are a few questions there.
Well, first, Mike.
Oh, go ahead, Larry. Yes.
I want to hold up these 2 books Mike lended me, which very helpful and which you might enjoy. The Arcadia one is pictures and captions, so you can see many pictures from our Olympics and a lot of information in the captions, long captions. This is an entire book about the 1904 Olympics, and it's well researched and it's written as a narrative, and it's quite interesting if you want to learn more.
I think you can get both of them on Amazon and sometimes on eBay at pretty reasonable prices.
So we have some questions. Why did it take so long?
So far, it's one question from Carol Diaz Granados about the trophies, and were they all made of silver?
I don't think so. I mean, they look different even in black and white. So, but I don't have a definitive answer on that. Mike, do you have any information?
No, I don't. I don't think they were solid silver for sure. I think most of them were probably silver plated metal at best. And they had the sheen of, very good silver, probably better than the pieces of like the VP Fair tray or some of the other pieces of souvenirs from the fair that had like spoons, a very thin silver plate that has worn off through the years.
That was it?
Holly just sent us a question about women's boxing being a demonstration sport, and what did a demonstration sport mean in that context? Did that mean they just couldn't win medals?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That they weren't an official Olympic event, therefore weren't the participants couldn't win official trophies or medals.
Now the questions are coming. When was the Olympic field named Francis Field, from Joe Girard?
I think when it was turned over shortly after the fair. Would that be true, Mike? That it was called it pretty early on?
Well, during the fair it was called the athletic field and the gymnasium. In early 1905, they returned back to Washington University. But I think it was a year or two later when the gate was donated by the Louisiana Purchase Exposition and paid for. And that's probably when they put the name Francis Field on the field and or gymnasium in honor of David Francis, who ran the fair. So it might have been a year or two after the fair, I'm guessing.
Well, close to the fair, not many years, not decades later.
And then just a couple of years ago, when the St. Louis Sports Commission worked with WashU and gained permission to put up the large statue of the Olympic rings, which, by the way, if you're on Forsyth and you turn into the parking area for the football stadium, you know, to the east of the stadium and go straight ahead, you cannot miss those Olympic rings. They're probably about, I'd guess, 9 feet tall with the pedestal underneath them. And they stand out beautifully, make a beautiful photo backdrop. And at that point in time, I think 2 years ago, they got permission to put the rings up and to rename the field from Francis Field to Francis Olympic Field.
And it's interesting, I looked up some photos of the Tokyo Olympics, seeing those same rings at various street corners, and almost identical, and seeing people posing for pictures with them like they do here. And I thought, well, we're a privileged city. You can't do that anywhere on your own. It has to be approved. You have to qualify. More?
We have a comment from Esley Hamilton about the gate being dated 1914. So obviously that came a little bit later.
Oh, okay.
And then we also have a question, same topic. How much of the Olympic stands are original, and were they the first concrete stadium? Was it the first concrete stadium?
Now that rings a bell about the concrete stadium, but I don't know what context the first Olympic, first in all of history. I don't know.
I will pass to Diane Rodemaker in a second, but I will put my 2 cents worth in. When I researched it, it had been claimed as the first Olympic stadium. For the World's Fair, I think a lot of excessive claims were made about being the first, the best, the biggest, and stuff like that. I do believe, though, that when I looked into it a few years back, that the Yale Stadium was made out of concrete and completed in 1901, whereas the WashU one wasn't completed until a year or two later. Diane?
Yeah, I think I heard something that it was, one of the early concrete stadiums. And when I was doing my research, that was about the time when the concrete grandstand is still there, but it was resurfaced. They put, something that more durable over it. So it doesn't look exactly like it did back then. But when I was doing my research back in like the 1990s, you could still see the vestiges of the numbers for the different sections. I think that's all gone now. But back in the 90s, you could still see that.
And the first part of that question, I doubt you sit on anything that's original, right?
Well, it was resurfaced, because I remember going there and taking pictures, and it's not like they knocked it down and then rebuilt it. They just put whatever they used. I don't know if it's like resurfacing your front porch, they put that pebbly stuff. And so, because I remember taking, some before and after pictures back in the 1990s.
Okay, yeah, there's Esley Hamilton's. Great job. Where did you get all the wonderful and rare photos, especially the portraits of George Poage?
Well, as I said, Max Starm for a number of years gave this every 4 years for a while, gave this presentation. And when PowerPoint came along, he just kept refining it. I don't know where he got all those pictures. I mean, there are some sources that are common for anyone to be able to locate, but he got a lot of those pictures even before the internet had so many. But as far as, I have no idea exactly where the George Poage pictures came from.
Yeah. So nice.
I don't
They
know
were
if
really
Max
nice.
had a copy, and I don't have a copy certainly, but there's a book by Spalding about the results of the 1904 games. That book potentially had some of the pictures that Max was able to access. Now, whether he had a copy or whether he borrowed it, I don't know.
Either.
But I do know, and I'm going to jump in here in case anybody else is typing a question or two. Back in 2002 or 3, Max got together with some Olympians, Olympic collectors, George Greensfelder, Jim Lally, and Bob Christensen. And Max already probably had found out about this. And the History Museum had drawers full of Olympic medals. And he got the History Museum or Historical Society to open up and allow them to professionally take pictures of a lot of the medals that hadn't seen the light of day for probably decades, to say the least. And they took the photos of these. Larry contributed to writing this book too, with writing a lot of the copy of that.
About the Olympics part, yeah.
Yeah, about the Olympics.
By the way, just if they saw some things that didn't look like Olympic medals, the book includes all kinds of medals for events that were called Olympic, but weren't. Am I right about that, Mike? I mean,
oh yeah,
those aren't all Olympic medals, but they're from
Here's two medals from an interscholastic meet for the state of Missouri.
Yeah. I just wondered if some people might have been confused by what they were seeing.
Right. But we're going to do something we haven't done in well over a year. We're going to draw some names from all the attendees and give away several copies of this book. It's going to take me a while to pull the names out from a report and draw some random names. And so if you get an envelope with one of these, it seems like a book, your name was drawn, and we'll pass the names on to Jana, maybe for this next bulletin that you'll get hopefully before the next meeting, because she's going to write the story about this meeting to be in the next bulletin. And we're going to have to hustle on that a little bit. But we're going to give away some of those books as attendance prizes for coming in and learning all about the Olympics. And we do have a number of these on hand. And I think, I'm not for sure, that our merchandise order form on our website allows you to buy these. So if you don't win one, you can still buy one. We bought out the stock from a guy in Florida of what he had and have a couple, 2 or 3 cases of them.
Mike, can I put in real quick that the next meeting is August 11th, and that's a little early in the month. And so that's why we are pushing the deadline a little bit for me. But it will be about the Swedish building, and it will be fascinating, and we hope that you'll get on Zoom.
Shh, you're stealing my thunder.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll go ahead about some of our upcoming meetings and events. We're also working on plans for meetings through the end of this year to include show and tell and our annual banquet. The board is beginning to make plans on that. And we're pretty sure we're going to go back to Moulin events downtown, and we're looking to do that on the weekend after December 1st, because December 1st is in the middle of the week. And for those people who work, that's a real tough one to make, since it goes until 8 or 9 o'clock at night and you're downtown in the dark, et cetera. It's not downtown, it's on Shoto, down near Lafayette Square. But, we're talking about the pros and cons on that. We'll keep you posted. But the upcoming meeting that Jana referred to is on Wednesday, August 11th. We'll have a new presentation about the history of the Swedish Pavilion and Sweden at the World's Fair. Lenora Lynham is going to be our presenter, and I haven't seen her name. I talked to her earlier today, and she wasn't sure if she was going to make it. She's the treasurer of the Smoky Valley Historical Association in Lindsborg, Kansas, which is known as Little Sweden. for its large percentage of people descended from the original Swedish settlers. The Old Mill Museum now displays and manages the Swedish Pavilion, which was originally bought for and used at the university there. So that's Wednesday, August 11th, and that'll be a Zoom meeting from Kansas. And then on Saturday, September 11th, I've been talking about this for a month or two, save the date. We're going to have our annual picnic in person in Forest Park Picnic Area 11. We're going to return to our favorite secluded picnic area in Forest Park. I promise you that we'll have great food and desserts, a fun game and activity, excellent fellowship, and great weather. Well, I can promise the first several things for sure. And let's keep our fingers crossed about the weather. It's been suggested also that we go back to in-person meetings. The libraries and Aberdeen and places where we normally host meetings are not yet opening up for group meetings, although they are open up for individuals, and they're telling people if you're not vaccinated to wear a mask and stuff like that. So I don't know if or when we'll be able to do in-person meetings in our typical venues. I'm hopeful that before the end of the year, we'll be able to do something like that. You know, that's essentially the end of the meeting. I want to, you know, give a big round of applause, wave your hands and act crazy, you know, for Larry for, you know, a super meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Some people are raising their hands. I see, that's good. And with that kind of